They won't remember the 99 things that you did well and you did perfectly. They'll remember the one thing that you F up.
I feel like I've actually committed a crime here.
And then it spirals, becomes something super serious, and then the SRA end up stepping in, they get struck off.
She never came back.
What did they do with the body?
Are we next?
I lost my love for it.
Is it safe to fail in a law firm?
That's absolutely mental. It's completely psychologically unsafe for everyone here.
And I got properly told off. I got taken into a meeting.
Are they literally going to fight or flight every time management calls them in?
If you continue to make these typos, you're going to get a disciplinary, basically.
You're stopping yourself from succeeding. Being an entrepreneur means you have to get used to getting sort of rejected, turned away, probably like slapped in the face quite often with things.
So, Helen, do you think that there is a culture of fear within law firms in terms of feeling like you have to be perfect, feeling like you can't fail, and feeling like you can't necessarily, therefore, be yourself?
So I'll tell you about probably one of the very best pieces of advice I was ever given in my career. It was as a first seat trainee. And it does stand true. They won't remember the 99 things that you did well and you did perfectly. They'll remember the one thing that you F up. And it's a horrible way to say it, because I think it does instill fear. But in law, that stands you in really good stead if you have that kind of mentality, which is obviously a bit toxic. You know, it meant that I always used to triple check my work. I was always super careful with things. I was always super careful with my attention to detail, because I think it's a big problem in the industry. I don't think people are that supportive when you do screw up. I think that's why we see trainees or junior lawyers who are really fearful, who then end up, you know, covering up something that was originally probably quite minor, and then it spirals, becomes something super serious, and then the SRA end up stepping in, they get struck off. I mean, okay, that's the extreme example, but it does happen. And I think we do need more of an atmosphere of support. I don't know, what's your experience on that one, Holly?
Yeah, the same thing in one firm. I mean, I'd love to get your comments on this actually, but I was properly told off for like doing typos, but the work had to be done at such a speed and such a turnaround that I was typing super fast, like reports, and they were internal reports. It wasn't like it was going out to any clients or anything like that. But there were typos because of the speed in which they wanted me to get things over the line, and the targets were so unrealistic that there were going to be mistakes, right? And I got properly told off. I got taken into a meeting where they were like, you've got a typo here, in terms of, it was like, I don't know, you know, things like a full stop missed off and whatnot. And they came up with a few different examples of this. And I was like, okay, I understand there can't be typos, but at the same time, you're coming to me in a way that's super serious. And I feel like I've actually committed a crime here. That they were, you know, I was properly told off for it. And it was like, if you continue to make these typos, then you're going to get a disciplinary, basically. And I was just like so scared. But then, I don't know, it just put me in this environment where I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared just to make one simple like slip up typo. And you know what's crazy, right? A similar thing happened to one of my colleagues. She got taken off to a meeting by the manager for doing a similar thing, like typos and I guess spelling mistakes and stuff like that, because it was such a quick turnaround. And she got taken to a meeting, right? She never came back. And I was like,
What?
yeah.
What did they do with the body?
We were all like, oh
That's
my God.
mental. How can you just not come back? She never went back to her desk.
She never got back to her desk. And then the manager came back and started packing all the stuff away a few hours later. And we were like, oh my gosh, what has she done with her? Are we next?
Is this the same law firm where they threatened to sue you?
No, it's a different one.
This is terrible. I can't imagine that, because on your desk you've got all sorts of things. Like, also you've got your own personal belongings in your drawers, right? You've got your tights. You've probably got, like, I don't know, various. You got your mug. You can't forget your mug. That actually got me in really deep trouble when I moved to actually, it was the last law firm I was at. I didn't realise everyone had a mug, and I was just there, like, just using whatever mug was in the cupboard, not realising that was a serious crime. But Anyway, that was funny. And my friend actually came up to me and she was like, don't you realise that it's got like Anna written across it in really big letters? Just wasn't the giveaway to me. But no, in all seriousness, that's absolutely mental. I mean,
I know.
I don't understand that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not okay really as a lawyer to be making lots of mistakes or typos and things like that. But at the same time, if you're forcing people to do ridiculously quick turnarounds, that's one thing. Did you find that the pressure they put on you through those meetings and through those conversations, did that make you sort of better or worse in terms of the typos? How did that kind of management style affect you?
Worse, much worse. Because I was nervous. I was worried. Whenever I got a call, a phone call, or an email from my manager, I was like on edge. Like, what are they going to say next?
Yeah,
And one time she called
yeah.
me, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Sat at my desk, like looking at the phone ringing, going, oh, what's she going to say? What's she going to say? I answer the phone. She goes to me, hi, Holly, just a quick one. How do you say this word in Spanish? And I was like, oh, thank God.
But that's the whole thing as well, isn't it? It's that fear of, I think, particularly when your body kind of goes into that fight or flight response with certain people because you're so fearful of them. And then, as you say, if the phone's ringing and their name comes up, you're straight away in that kind of freeze state. And it doesn't mean, it means you're probably not listening properly. I think we were talking about this earlier on, weren't we? It's that thing about what creates a psychologically safe environment, because a lot of law firms will say, yes, we're improving culture. And it's like, okay, but it's completely psychologically unsafe for everyone here. So first of all, you need to look at you. What's your effect on people? Do they feel able to open up? Do they feel able to express themselves freely? Are they literally going to fight or flight every time management calls them?
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
It's not a great state to be in. Jono's put a comment here. Do you think being scared and chasing perfection means people overthink it, often creating more errors as a result, which is what you asked? And I do agree. Did that happen to you, Helen? Have you ever felt like under more pressure, which has then caused more mistakes?
I think I was just like, I don't mean any kind of any kind of mental illness way, but I think I was just massively neurotic about attention to detail.
Yeah.
Like, so neurotic about it. I would check things so many times, and because of that, I mean, gosh, someone would probably come forward and say that I used to make a million mistakes, but particularly on junior, like when it was on me to do the final drafts, I don't think I did, because I was just that neurotic. I'm not saying that's a great way to be, but I just thought that that level of perfection had to be attained. I think it was all the pressure I put on myself. It was the pressure probably that was all around me, but equally, I started out at a firm which had really high standards. And I don't necessarily say that as a negative. I was proud to be part of a firm where, the work that produced was sort of top quality global work, and it was really important. And I don't know, that's just how it was. So I suppose for me, it didn't necessarily have an adverse effect, but equally, if you're always fearful probably in your whole career of making the tiniest error, I think weirdly enough, I became more relaxed as I got more senior, because I had more of a sense of what was important and what wasn't important. And then I think also what people don't realize is you reach a certain point of seniority when suddenly things flow a bit more. You're able to express yourself more freely, more quickly, more succinctly, and you'll often see it with partners. They'll just almost be a bit blasé, but not blasé at the same time, and say things in that kind of way. And they're not so bothered about perfection. For me, the perfection thing was definitely at the more junior end of my career, because I really didn't have a barometer of what was super important and what wasn't. So for me, everything was super important, which was pretty stressful. But I think that's probably the case for most lawyers. I don't think I was any exception there.
It's a tricky one because you've got to be technically spot on, but at the same time you have this like psychological unsafeness. And even if it doesn't cause you to make more mistakes, like Gabriel's just mentioned, it can cost you personally through energy and stress, and which then just affects you later down the line, and it's just something that impacts you in different ways. And then this is when you get like the proper burnout and stress years later or whatever. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Gabriel makes, actually, that it may not cause more mistakes, but it costs you more personally in stress and energy. And I think I really agree with that, because I think that's the thing for me. My law career chipped away at me over a long time. I never had any big burnout or anything like that, but I lost my love for it. So people say to me now, do you not want to be a lawyer again? Do you not want to go back? And I'm like, ooh, you know, no thanks, no thanks. But I think that's the thing. It does all of these things, all of this weight, all of this stress, the pressure, the narcissist, the whatever else, it chips away at you. That's the reality of it. And some people love being a lawyer and they stick at it because it's the right thing for them. And I think there are some of us who just think we won't stick with it, but that's probably a shame because we're probably losing a lot of good lawyers about because of that. And I think Scott makes a really good comment as well, which is that I'm going to bring it up on screen again. Holly's experience is the reality for most lawyers. It doesn't up your game. It makes you so stressed out. You start making mistakes everywhere. And I think and I've seen people literally go to pieces there. And then I've seen them get bullied by, say, a narcissistic boss, because then that boss picks up on everything and will be, say, ringing that person at midnight, 1 a.m, sending them constant emails, constantly checking in, saying, you haven't done this right, you haven't done this right. And I think that's where, if you get a nasty personality involved, people can get really ground into the ground.
I think from my perspective, the question of, is it safe to fail in a law firm? And is there a culture of fear? I think, yes, there's a culture of fear in a lot of places. I'm not talking about all of them, but in my experience. But also, I think that it's not safe to fail. I think no matter where you go, whether it's a big firm or a small independent firm, in my experience, there's no option to fail and you have to be perfect. What do you think about perfectionism in law, Helen?
I think this is probably slightly like, oh gosh, reflective of my own sort of slightly toxic mindset growing up with this. And I think this goes back to the people that become lawyers. Often we get it, law sort of sweeps up all of the high achieving type A personalities. Now I remember growing up, my dad's lovely and he did always mean it in a jokey way, but equally it stuck in my head, right, because I'm still quoting it. There's this scene in Apollo 13, the movie, which my dad used to be obsessed with, and my dad does all the ironing at home, but my parents' home, not my home anymore, just to make that clear. And in this particular scene, there's this bit where I think, I'm going to get this wrong, someone can correct me in the chat, but they're going to come back into the Earth's atmosphere. And as they do so, there's a chance that they may just completely burn up and then it's all over, dead, etc. And someone turns around and they just say, but what happens if we fail? And the guy just says, I'm not going to put on an American accent now because there will be Americans watching who will make a lot of fun of me. But he just goes, failure is not an option. And that's what I used to say to my dad before I went into exams. I'd be like, but what if I fail? And he'd just say, failure is not an option. So for me, I was already primed for high-end city law toxic culture, like, talking about failure. No, we don't fail, we don't make mistakes, we don't do that, And of course it means that it's probably not the healthiest of mentalities, and it's interesting because now I probably still carry to a certain extent that kind of mentality in the sense of I have high standards. But I think what we have to do as well is look at a growth mindset. And for example, in business, you have to keep failing in order to succeed. So, if perfection is holding you back from trying new things, then actually you're stopping yourself from succeeding, which is a really key point, I think. You're nodding, Holly. You've got stuff to say.
I've got I've got a good question. So obviously we've got partners here, so you can also answer. But so you're talking about being a lawyer and being entrepreneurial. Being a lawyer, we've established that it's not necessarily a safe environment to fail, and failure is not necessarily an option in a lot of cases. But entrepreneurship, as Scott mentions in other places, that you need you need to have a growth mindset. You need to understand that failure comes, and you get success from failure because you learn from your mistakes and you have to fail your way to success in some situations. So in that sense, entrepreneurship and being a lawyer clashes in terms of the failure aspect, but you say that 80% of becoming a partner is entrepreneurship. So how do you basically come to terms with these two conflicts when you become a partner? Because you're a lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I think this is a big problem for a lot of lawyers, if I'm honest. I think lawyers are sort of, I'm speaking generally here, but are very afraid of rejection, very afraid of making mistakes. Actually, being an entrepreneur means you have to get used to getting sort of rejected, turned away, probably like, slapped in the face quite often with things. People don't want to talk to you, people don't want your products or your services, people think it's a terrible idea, whatever it is. And I think, that's why it's such a huge transition. You have to go from being this sort of primed technical top lawyer who's probably a perfectionist and trying not to make mistakes and everything, into someone who's willing to try out new things and be innovative and creative. And for me, failure and success are not like, they're not opposites. Failure is the route to success. It's just, you just keep trying things until eventually something works. And I think it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem with the lawyer mindset, because actually what you have to, all law firms, it's hilarious really, their rhetoric is, we're so creative and we're so innovative minds. It's like, no, you're not. Give me one innovative idea you've actually come up with this year that's different in the whole market. No. And in fact, when you really look at it, your pep's going down. So let's see the innovation. I'm going to have so much hate from law firms. I'm managing partners sending me hate mail. But I think that there is something in it, and we have to realise we've got to grow. What's
True.
Oh, sorry.
I want to put up a comment from
John
Christina
Otis.
because I like it.
Okay, yeah.
Perfection is an illusion. If there was such a thing as perfection, we would all be out of work. I think it's 100% true. But when it comes to law, and I do understand that there has to be a level of perfection in dealing with clients, and it has to be so legally on point, a lot of the work that we do. It's hard, isn't it? Because it needs to be like perfection as much as we can have it, but perfectionism all round is just pretty much quite difficult to achieve.
I think on this point as well, it's made me think of something now, which is this whole, I think one of the biggest things that holds lawyers back, if I can speak properly, is the fact that we're trained to be so risk averse. That's not helpful in business. You are trained to think of all the things that could possibly go wrong. So not only are you afraid of failure, you're this perfectionist, you're in this complete straitjacket. You're actually looking at all of the worst things out there. I mean, it's terrible for your mental health, really, isn't it? But aside from that, it just, how do you become a good business person within that? And I think it's really important to shed light on this, because I think, as anything with mindset goes, you can retrain your mind. You can train yourself to think differently, but I think you have to get in a healthier space with perfectionism, with, your appetite for risk, with all of this stuff, because even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur or a partner, you're probably not going to be in a great mental state, because you're going to spend all your time worrying and being anxious. And that's probably another reason why we're off the scale for, anxiety, etc. in law. I don't know, what do you think of that and the risk averse? Are you risk averse, Holly? I don't think you're risk averse.
No, I don't think so.
I think you're the opposite of risk averse. You're just like, let's do it. I was like, the water cooler. You're like, yeah, tomorrow. I was like, we should probably think about it, shouldn't we?
Do you know what? A lot of people think that I'm a risk taker, a risky person. But
I think you're a risky person, to be honest. I will let you speak.
I beg to differ, because I think that every decision that I take, people think, oh, that's a bit risky. But it's something that I've thought through for so long that it seems random and off the cuff and very risky to other people on the outset. But inside, it's something that I've debated and thought about for a long time. So yeah, but I'm not afraid to take risks, but they're very calculated risks. Do you know what I mean?
I think that goes to a point, though, where people often think, when you make a big life decision, like when I left law, for example, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're doing some crazy thing. Oh no, I didn't just wake up on Saturday and think this was a good idea. No, I didn't just, put an extra sugar in my tea and go a bit crazy. That's not how it works, is it? And I think often
I beg to differ on that point.
I am drinking too much sugar in my tea actually out here, because they don't have the milk's different. Anyway, we've had our teas chat, haven't we? We had our tea chat on episode 1. But I'm aware of time, Holly, and I'm keen just to think about, do we want to cover something around actually what do we think law firms could do to, help people feel as though it's a bit of a safer place to grow and thrive in? What do you think?
It's a tricky one, because I think law firm culture and this might be controversial, but I feel like it's just set up to not be a safe psychological environment to fail in, based on the experiences that, you know, I've had, that you've had, based on the toxicity within work cultures that we always talk about. So I think it's a difficult one, and as it stands, I'm not sure of the steps that can be taken to make it feel less of a risk to fail. But I think with newer firms coming up, because I know, you know, people like Hannah, who's got Hanlaw, she's created a new environment where people feel safer in. You've got other firms popping up that are trying to make it a nice place, basically, and for people to feel more comfortable to fail, because we're talking about failure. But yeah, I don't know. Have you got any ideas?
I think the main thing is, like, essentially law firms are people. It's a people business, right? So if you're going to improve culture, you need to look at the people. And first and foremost, you need to look at the leaders, because they're the ones who determine the values of the culture and actually how that's going to be implemented. It is something that needs to be throughout the firm, but first of all, leadership need to actually walk the walk on it.
Hmm.
And from that, I think leadership needs to take a long, hard look at themselves and see if they're actually living out the values that they propagate. And then they need to properly manage staff, and they need to, they need to train staff properly, train the managers properly, and actually call out bad behaviour, not allow people to behave in bad ways, in bullying ways, actually hold people accountable. And I think also stop rainmakers from getting away with murder, which still happens a lot. So I think we need to really work on having a psychologically safe environment, is what I'd say in like a 1 minute nutshell.
Yeah, I do agree. It comes from leadership, and it comes from being feeling like you can openly speak. And I think, yeah, having supportive environments and mentors and nurturing brilliant lawyers, like Juliet says, that, you know, there are law firms that have this. Yeah, I mean, we're talking from our own experiences on our own, the firms that we've been in, and they've not necessarily been that supportive. But we know there are firms that are supportive. Do you know what I mean?
And I'd like to just comment on that as well and say that I wouldn't necessarily say that all the firms I've been at have been unsupportive or anything like that. So as I'm speaking about, there's a high bar for perfection. I think in terms of seeing, you know, law firms full of supportive people who are mentoring and nurturing brilliant lawyers, from my experience of sort of speaking to a huge number of people in the industry and the people I hear from every week, my impression is that that is the minority of firms, or the minority of teams within firms, because you've got to remember, big firms are not just one culture. There are so many sub teams and subcultures within that. So it's great to hear. And I think, Juliet, if you know of, you know, really great things that are happening on, and it happen in great firms and great people, like, it's great to hear about it. I think it's that we still know that there is a big problem in the industry as a whole. And I just to put Scott's comment up here as well, which is, if you want people to grow and innovate, you have to create an environment that embraces failure as a good thing, because you need iteration, and iteration means you haven't got it right. And I think that's true. We do need definitely more open and honest cultures where people do feel supported, for sure.
I want to put another comment up, which I think is really important to note. Showing vulnerability to create a safe environment. I tried it and my team responded positively, but funnily enough, a partner then used what I shared against me. It's bonkers. Yeah, people do this. I
Yeah.
feel like is this a trait of, I'm not an expert, but is this a trait of narcissistic behavior? Using things against you?
It can be, but I mean, I think without more, we
No, we
couldn't
couldn't.
really use the term. But I think that that's the problem a lot of the time. I mean, I've seen that myself in various different firms, or spoken to different people where they say, oh, people were supportive, but then the partners weren't. And I think that's another thing which we haven't really touched on today, which is a big thing around partnership or progression, in that I think there's a whole thing around, you can't look weak in front of partners,
Yeah.
because they're the ones who make the decisions about your career. And to a large extent, I think there is a lot of truth in it. You ideally want good partners who are strong mentors, who back you and back your mistakes. That isn't the case in so many cases. There is that fear of, you know, slipping up in front of the person who makes the decision on your promotion. I think in any industry, someone wouldn't want that. And that's a really big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this is a massive topic, and thanks so much everyone for having your input and putting the comments down, because it's so important to have different perspectives, and sometimes there's things that we miss or we're not aware of, and it's just so good to create a more well-rounded conversation. So thanks so much for that, everyone. We're going to come to the end of this, but next week it's going to be a little bit more fun, and we're going to be talking about, well, it's going to be titled Bali to Barcelona, Lawyers in the Wild. And we're going to be talking about our summer, I guess, aren't we? Sharing our experiences.
I think summer, also digital nomad life. We're both digital nomads, aren't we? Living in different parts of the world. And we get a lot of interest about where we are, what we're doing, how we make that work, how we run our businesses, all that kind of thing. And also, we both speak to a lot of lawyers now who have all sorts of different flexible arrangements, don't we? So it's just quite cool to talk about it, I think, sometimes, so people know what's going on, or can get inspiration if that's what you think you might want to do, or you can just ask us random questions about the summer or tell us about yours as well.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Nice
We're up
one.
for that. But yeah, thanks everyone. And just to
Thank
say
you.
as well, like, we do appreciate as well that our views on this are obviously limited. We try to keep it to our experiences and the conversations we've had with people. And I think if you do have different experiences, please do talk about that, because we want to open up the conversation exactly for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much for coming, everyone. And sorry if we didn't put your comment up. We will read them all. We have read them as we've gone through, and we really appreciate your support.
Thanks so much.
All right.
See you next week.
Yeah.